Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, March 13th, 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host of the most, Will Buchanan, How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we do our best to try to be a news podcast, which means that we do only get our sources from the most reputable sites with award-winning journalism. We do not do sensational news like Fox News, The Blaze, Newsmax, whatever extreme left or extreme right that some people publicate to. We simply don't do that. We give you the facts and nothing but the facts. At the same time, guys, we do try to watch our language, but words do fly. At the same time, guys, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. Well, I guess we got to start with the elephant in the room. And by the elephant in the room, I think we got to talk about the simple fact, the matter of people are worried. Well, not people, but you should be worried because what we're kind of seeing right now with a certain app that seems to be on the mind of everybody these days, including the government, TikTok, as the government marches ever so much to the end of actually banning the app. Teens and younger kids are a little bit worried.
We're following breaking news on Capitol Hill. The House just voted on the future of TikTok in the U.S. Lawmakers considering a bill that would require Chinese company ByteDance to sell TikTok or face a ban in the United States. NBC senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor joins us now with more on this. The final vote here, 352 to 65, overwhelming, bipartisan. Sahil, this bill now goes to the Senate, where its future is less clear. But this is a big step. So what would this bill do if passed?
That's right, Joe. This is a huge vote, 352 members of the House. It needed a two-thirds majority to pass under this process, and it cleared that with a wide margin to spare. There were some notable opponents here from both the left and the right. Some progressive members like Mark Pocan and Pramila Jayapal opposed it. They said the process was too rushed. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is one of them. Others opposed it from the right, like Congressman Thomas Massey, who argued that there were First Amendment concerns. But nevertheless, a huge vote that would force TikTok's parent company to sell it or get banned. Remember, the heart of the problem here is that TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, is a Chinese-based company based in Beijing, subject to Chinese law that says if China asks the company for information, it is required to hand it over. And that information could include user data on some 150 to 170 million Americans who use it. That's a tantalizing trove of information that the Chinese government could, in theory, get its hands on if that law were to be triggered, which is why the U.S. government considers this a national security threat. So that's what the bill would do, force ByteDance to sell TikTok or face a ban in the United States. It goes to the Senate now, where there's less urgency about this bill, and senators have a whole bunch of different ideas about, how to approach this. Some of them want a broader approach that covers categories of companies, not simply one company, maybe other Chinese companies, maybe other companies controlled by foreign adversaries. So the fate of this bill in terms of getting to President Biden's desk is still very much up in the air, Joe.
TikTok has put on a full court press to try and stop this from happening, including going to Washington, bringing people of small businesses that rely on TikTok to Washington. What is TikTok saying about this movement right now?
Yeah, there's been an aggressive lobbying blitz from TikTok, which kind of flared up last year when we first started hearing, a meaningful push on Capitol Hill to ban TikTok. They've flooded Capitol Hill with content creators, several of whom have millions of followers, pleading with lawmakers to protect the app, arguing that their own livelihoods depend on it. There are a lot of young people in particular, Joe, who are vigorous users of TikTok, vigorous users of this app, and rely on it to get their news, rely on it for entertainment. So TikTok has been trying to take advantage of that. They've also issued push alerts and notifications to many of their users, trying to send them to, light up the phone lines, to burn up the phone lines of congressional offices in a bid to save it. It does seem to have had some impact. I mean, if you look at some of the no's on the list, they represent towns with lots of young voters. One example there is Mark Pocan, who represents Madison, Wisconsin, a lot of college students there. He told me he was simply not convinced by the administration's security briefings, that in fact it was so unconvincing to him that it moved him from being open-minded to no. He's obviously in the minority here because most House lawmakers do support this bill to ban TikTok. Most senators we talk to also support the idea of doing something that would change the way TikTok is currently operating in terms of its ownership, the links to the Chinese government. Whether that happens in the Senate, very unclear still. It's got a long way to go. And as I mentioned, senators just don't have quite the same level of urgency that House members did in zooming this bill to the floor with that unanimous committee vote last week and this full House vote today that just passed the chamber, Joe.
One person who's moving in the opposite direction of many members of Congress is former President Trump. He wanted to ban.
So I'm going to stop it right there because, again, for what we're about to show on the Trump side, let's just say that's going to be interesting. But yes, the U.S. government, a government that can't seem to figure out how to fix its spending problem, a government that can't seem to figure out how to help the American people, a government that can't figure out how to solve student loans, a government that can't figure out how to solve the mortgage problem, a government that can't figure out how to make, basically anything for the American citizen. But TikTok, an app that's owned by a Chinese company with data they cannot get a hold of, but theoretically, out of the fear that the Chinese government could request U.S. personnel data, metadata. Now, again, for a lot of people of my age and up, it's like, why do we care? The government hates competition. We know this for a fact. But here is the thing that they're trying to scare you about. And I know a lot of people are like, well, if the House passes this bill, TikTok's going to be banned. Not exactly correct. It does have to go to the Senate. The Senate does have to vote to ban TikTok. And if you believe Biden, what he said, that as long as the bill is sent to his desk, he'll sign it. But it is amazing to me that for an app that isn't a part of the Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Threads, US based, if you will, because they have no problem with metadata from Facebook /Meta. They have no problem with metadata from Instagram. They have no problem with metadata from Snapchat or any of the other US-based apps. The government already has access to it. But with TikTok is kind of that liberal bastion of social media apps. I enjoy it. It's fun to be on there. People are learning things on there. Information, whether it's verified or not, let's just be honest, there's no way to actually PolitiFact it, but it's available to others. People have made businesses off of it. People have quit jobs and made 4 or 5 times the amount of their normal salary at a 9-to-5 job and made on TikTok. People have become more content creators. What these apps have done is actually created an avenue for people to break away from the rat race and actually embrace their creative side. So Congress, out of all things, their big scare is we don't want the Chinese government to have U.S. personnel data. So they don't. So because they couldn't purchase it like they purchased it from all the U.S. apps, they said, well, if you're not going to give it to us, you're a threat. Theoretically, we have to ban you. Which again is in theory. And even so, let's think about this for a second. Let's really think about this. Say, for instance, the Chinese government does request the data from TikTok to be given to them. Let's ask one big-ass question. What can the Chinese government actually do with our metadata? Send you personalized videos, send you personalized ads. Because if you've been on Wish, Temu, or any of those other low-budget sites, guess what? They already have it. You're already being sent it. And again, it's not like they can use this to undermine national security. But the way these politicians tell it, you would swear up and down it's the second coming of the Cold War. That's the scare. The whole thing. And the thing is, this is why I say politicians are so disconnected with the youth. because the last thing he said at the end was, how many people are using TikTok? Millions of registered voters who would rather get their information from TikTok than any other source. Just like the baby boomers would rather watch Fox News, well, some of them would rather watch Fox News than actually go onto a news site or a blog or anywhere else. They'll watch TV. Why? They're used to it. That's where they get their source news from. Those of a younger generation may go to the internet. Those younger than them may go to social media apps. The thing is, how the news is been received and who reads it has changed. But the one thing about Congress which kills me is that you would think, because the whole scare is TikTok is a Chinese company, the Chinese will forever try something that they think will undermine us. And I'm really like, what can they do with honestly, that would be me. If I was asking that question, I would have to ask politicians, what can the Chinese government do with our metadata? What can they do? Outside of knowing our preferences, outside of knowing our browser history, outside of knowing personal things, outside of financial information, what can the Chinese government do with that data if given to them? I mean, is it me, or does the US government just does not like competition? Because they get their metadata. Our metadata is purchased, sold off to different other companies. And instead of Congress going, well, I don't like the fact that OnStar can sell your data that they pick up off your car and can sell to insurance companies as an excuse to raise and drop your rates at unprecedented times. I don't see Congress going, oh, we need to stop OnStar, because they are basically making a profit off your metadata and you're paying more than the insurance companies. Nobody's stopping them. But yet, TikTok is a problem. But the crazy part about this whole thing is what Donald Trump said about it. Because let's be honest, Trump right now is drawing straws at everything humanly possible. And we're not surprised that, because of a certain donor that's in mind, now he's for TikTok.
Congress are preparing to receive a classified briefing from U.S. intelligence agencies on the security threat posed by TikTok. It comes ahead of a House vote tomorrow on a bill that would require TikTok's Chinese parent company to sell its U.S. operations to an American company or be banned from the U.S.
I have a lot of concern about the interference of authoritarian and totalitarian governments like China and like Russia in our open and free and democratic society.
The bill is expected to pass the House with bipartisan support. Its future in the Senate remains unclear. U.S. intelligence agencies have included TikTok among their top threats to national security. But now, former President Trump, who spearheaded efforts to ban the app when he was president, is reversing course and opposing the bill. In an interview yesterday, he said a ban would make young people, quote, go crazy.
There are a lot of users. There's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad with TikTok. But the thing I don't like is that without TikTok, you can make Facebook bigger. And I consider Facebook to be an enemy of the people.
Trump's reversal comes just days after he met with a Republican donor who reportedly has a major financial stake in TikTok. But Trump denies speaking to that donor about TikTok at their meeting. The company says a ban would trample the First Amendment rights of 170 million Americans. People who make a living on TikTok videos have flooded Capitol Hill opposing the bill.
90% of our sales are on TikTok Shop. And we would basically, we would lose all of our customers.
At a national security hearing yesterday, FBI Director Christopher Wray warned the Chinese government may be able to use TikTok to control software on millions of users' devices.
And they said, we want you to put out videos that make Americans fight with each other or spread conspiracy theories and get them at each other's throat. ByteDance can't go to Chinese court and fight the Communist Party. They would have to do it.
That's my understanding. And I would just add that kind of influence operation, or the different kinds of influence operations you're describing, are extraordinarily difficult to detect.
Top intelligence officials also warn of unprecedented threats against the U.S., including concerns about China and Russia trying to use artificial intelligence to influence the presidential election, and concerns about dangerous individuals coming across the southern border.
There are a whole host of threats that emanate from the border, and some of them are criminal threats.
So what we're really getting from this is a whole lot of maybe that's possible. Maybe it can happen. Maybe China and Russia can work together. But again, I would have to ask this question. What can they do with your data? Oh, they can influence the election. No different than certain political PACs have already done. I'm sorry, when Trump came out, there were so many political PACs for Trump that, of course, that his whole cult grew because of that. That at the same time, they are no different from anybody else. So again, I ask this question: what is the threat of TikTok having theoretically giving their information to the Chinese government if asked? If ordered. I still ask that question. What is that? You're speaking in theories about an app. Who's not to say that Facebook or Facebook/Meta or any other app would do the same? Because it's TikTok, because it's not US based owned. That's the problem, because that's what it goes down to. You heard a couple of people that have TikTok businesses. That their business, a large majority of it in sales, come from the app. So again, let's look at the real reason. The real reason why TikTok is such a threat to the US government. It's something they cannot control. It's something that they don't have access to. Because if you really look at it, they tried to embrace TikTok. It wasn't last year that they tried to embrace TikTok on their electronic devices, and what happened? Oh, well, we shouldn't use this because there's a chance that this data could be compromised. I'm like, wait, what? You guys went from gung-ho about being on TikTok. Some politicians actually use TikTok to reach out to their voters. Again, the disconnect. Like I said, some politicians have embraced TikTok and said, this is how I'm talking to my constituents because this is what they use. Some politicians have figured that out. Whereas other politicians, let's just be honest, at this point, Congress is looking like an old folks' home because term limits and age requirements need to be applied yesterday. But all of them are saying the same thing. It's this whole thing of, it's just the fact that there's too many possible instances that TikTok can be used. First off, TikTok is not Al-Qaeda. I'm sorry, TikTok is not Al-Qaeda. It isn't. But the way they make it, the way they're talking about, the way they make it seem, it might as well be 2.0. At the same time, I'm sorry, the only thing that points out to me about TikTok, about the government wanting to ban it, is not protecting America's metadata. It's more like, if we can't get it, nobody can get it. That's what it seems like. Because again, they can get everything else, every other app that's US based, they can get the data from it if they wanted to. But TikTok is the one liberal bastion that they can't. And instead of leaving it be, they decide that we need to get rid of it. If that's not paranoia, I don't know what is. But it is going to the Senate at this moment. Again, it's a toss-up. We know Republicans will fight like hell to get TikTok banned. Some Democratic senators may go ahead and approve, may go ahead and go with them. But again, for this to work, it takes a large majority of the Senate on both sides to send this bill to President Biden's desk. And again, it's not open and shut. It really isn't. But we shall see. But speaking of President Biden, last week he did give his State of the Union address. And after some highlights, I got some thoughts.
A feisty State of the Union address.
I will not bow down.
Relishing the back and forth with Republicans.
I know you know how to read. If any of you don't want that money in your district, just let me know.
The president looking to demonstrate he has the vigor and vision to serve another 4 years, and sharply critiquing his likely Republican challenger.
You can't love your country only when you win.
Without ever mentioning former President Trump's name. On Russia,
my predecessor, a former Republican president, tells Putin, quote, do whatever the hell you want. That's a quote.
On the Capitol attack.
My predecessor and some of you here seek to bury the truth about January 6th.
And on abortion rights.
He's the reason it was overturned, and he brags about it.
President Biden vowing to restore Roe v. Wade if he has the votes in Congress, and in a rare moment admonishing the Supreme Court justices in attendance for their role.
With all due respect, justices, women are not without electoral power. Electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that.
Facing low approval ratings on the economy, the president delivering an optimistic view, touting strong job growth and unemployment at a 50-year low following the pandemic.
Turning setback into comeback. That's what America does.
And on immigration, with a record number of migrants entering the country since he took office, President Biden blamed Republicans for rejecting a bipartisan border security bill that Mr. Trump opposed.
We can fight about fixing the border, or we can fix it.
Even holding up a button given to him by Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene, who demanded he acknowledge the death of Georgia nursing student Laken Riley after an undocumented immigrant was charged with her murder.
Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself.
Still, Alabama Senator Katie Britt, delivering the Republican rebuttal, slammed the president's handling of the border.
President Biden's border policies are a disgrace. This crisis is despicable. And the truth is, it is almost entirely preventable.
The president acknowledging his age.
I know it may not look like it, but I've been around a while.
And using it to deliver a political point.
The issue facing our nation isn't how old we are. It's how old are our ideas.
Trying to reframe the issue while contrasting himself with Mr. Trump.
My lifetime has taught me to embrace freedom and democracy. Now other people my age see it differently. The American story of resentment, revenge, and retribution, that's not me.
And one note, a man who heckled President Biden last night was a Gold Star father whose son, a Marine, was among 13 U.S. service members killed during the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. That father was arrested for his outburst last night. As for President Biden's performance, it really went a long way to ease Democrats' concerns about his age. During what was a 33-minute walk out of the chamber, a senior Democrat said to the president, "Nobody's going to call you cognitively impaired now." Savannah.
All right, Peter.
So really and truly, the thing about the State of the Union, I gotta point this out. The thing about the State of the Union, which kills me to a certain extent, I wish they would be honest. You know, you probably seen a State of the Union once or two in your life, and the president always starts off, "The State of the Union is strong." No, it really isn't. And it is my wish that one president, one day, one freaking day, would be honest about that. That I'll give it to Biden. I will say this. Did he seem like a very, he seemed like a very fired up individual there? Yes. Did he make some points? To an extent, yes. But when it comes down to it, and if you've been listening to my podcast for a while, I have sat there and said Biden is going to have some pretty big chasms to cross. He's going to have an issue connecting to minority voters. Even his president, Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, will also have an issue connecting to minority voters because a lot of minority voters are asking the same question. What has the president done for us? And it's a valid question. But at the same time, Biden also has to question, President Biden, sending buku buckets of money to Israel and to Ukraine. You have to answer for that. When you're American people here, whose food stamps and things are being cut, whose paychecks are getting smaller, inflation is still around, prices are still high, and you're sitting there saying, well, the economy is doing better. From what side of the proverbial income line, sir? Because again, he has to answer that. But I do love the fact that he did point out the Supreme Court justices and said, you guys ticked off women and you're going to find out, which is a nice way of saying, like I've been saying, ladies, because you, along with minorities, along with the LGBTQ plus group, are going to be the biggest definition of who gets to be president next year. Who gets to be president? You guys, because the reason why, And I'm going to be honest. Well, let's look down. Roe versus Wade getting shot down last year. Parts of affirmative action, which led to college acceptance, was gutted because 4 Asians believed that an Ivy League school was discriminating them because of their race, which turned out to kind of be bullshit. But hey, with part of that AA turned down, diversity and inclusion programs and positions were eliminated because those companies did not have to fear retaliation of lawsuits. So every DEI position, especially those in Florida, are now gone. And again, the people also, let's not forget in Florida the don't say gay bill. Let's not forget in Texas about gay therapy, as far as gay therapy or conversion therapy being banned. Let's not talk about the fact that abortion laws were put in well before Roe versus Wade was triggered. So multiple states outlawed abortion for all you pro-life nut jobs. Again, this particular area of those people, each of those groups of people have been scorned. And yet, these same politicians that made those decisions are not asking to go to the polls. Yes, those 3 groups of individuals will determine who actually becomes president next year. I'm sorry, but if I'm the Republicans, I'm a little bit freaking nervous. But that only depends if everybody votes. But going back to the State of the Union, yes, he gave a fiery speech. Yes, President Biden is old. He's not an invalid. He is fully functional. He is still a politician. So the whole thing about him being too old, yes, he's 80 plus years old. Do we really need people in the White House to the point to where they were really there when the White House was built? Probably not. At the same time, look at your choices. Look at who goes in. And I say this all the time, people. Like, how do people in Congress stay in there? Well, it's called basically running and getting voted in. And at the same time, you keep that job until you croak or until you resign. You can have those. There's no such thing as term limits. You can keep going. Why do you think Mitch McConnell, Moscow Mitch, stayed in the Senate for as long as humanly possible? This man was a lifetime politician. At one point, the most powerful man in the Senate. And now decided in his upper age that he wants to step down. And then you have other politicians that are doing the same thing. There needs to be term limits in Congress. There needs to be age limits in Congress. And damn it, I'll even go far as say there needs to be requirements of education in Congress. For example, you can't be on the education committee unless you actually have a degree in education, you were a teacher, you ran a curriculum or created a curriculum, and above all else, you have the kavats to prove it. You can't work in finance unless you actually have a business degree, or you've run a business, or you've actually done something. Business-wise, actually bring the experience. Again, all these areas, Food and Drug Administration, all those, because you know the funny part about each of these areas, a lot of those people that are on those committees do not have the experience to back it up, nor the experience or the education. That also needs to change. But going back to the State of the Union, Biden did actually give a somewhat great speech, but I wish he was honest about the State of the Union. It's not solid, it's not strong, it is fracked. And if he started with that, you would have a completely different speech. Because I get it. You have to be hopeful. You have to be upbeat. You have to be optimistic. But I also believe you also have to be realistic and address what every American that is watching the State of the Union thinking. And if you're not doing that, then you truly are disconnected. But speaking of disconnected, the Republican response. Now, of course, because we have a Democratic administration, the Democratic president gets the State of the Union, it is up to the opposing party to give the response. The response by the Republicans, and if you watch Saturday Night Live, you're probably going to beat me to the punch on this. But let's be honest. If you're the Republican Party, the party of old, white, rich men, you realize you cannot put another old white man to rebuttal an old white man. So, of course, you have to go through the checklist. Let's see. Do we want a black guy? Do we want a white woman? Yeah, white woman. They'll go over on Fox. Do we want her to be very homely, very next girl door type, or is it more like Melania Trump? Melania Trump was out. Let's go next door type. Okay, so we have white girl next door type. Oh, where should we put her? Should we put her in front of a small business so we can show that we're the party of small business? Should we put her in a church so we can sit there and say we're the party of moral values? Where should we put her? I got it. Let's put her in the kitchen. And yet, this tells you everything you need to know about the Republican response, except the Republican representative, Katie Britt, is not giving a response. She is probably giving the worst Oscar performance probably ever.
On paper, Senator Katie Britt was an excellent choice to deliver the response to the State of the Union. At 42 years old, she is the youngest Republican woman ever elected to the Senate, the first woman senator from Alabama. Britt's a mother of two. She's married to a former NFL player. She's widely considered to be a rising political star with genuine political acumen. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina even suggested that, quote, she represents the future of the Republican Party. The party clearly expected her to knock it out of the park. New York Times reports that a close ally of Senator Britt sent talking points to conservative influencers ahead of the speech, suggesting words of praise, including, quote, she came off like America's mom. She gets it. They compared her response to Ronald Reagan's famous Berlin Wall speech and described it as reminiscent of his message of that shining city on a hill. Before she uttered a single word, the author of these talking points declared that Britt's speech was pitch perfect. And for the first 60 seconds or so of the speech, it seemed fine. She was smiling at her kitchen table, talking about the future of America, but it quickly took a real turn.
We see you. We hear you. And we stand with you.
The Daily Beast described the speech as, quote, bizarrely delivered with an over-the-top dramatic cadence that left political operatives and observers struggling to make sense of it. The performance was so bad that some Republicans watched the high-profile speech with a grimace. According to one strategist, everyone's effing losing it. It's one of our biggest disasters ever. Rolling Stone was inundated with messages absolutely torching Britt's absurdly overdramatic rebuttal. A Trump advisor wrote, quote, what the hell am I watching right now? A Republican pollster called it creepy. And a senior House congressional aide described it as cringe-inducing to watch and likely destined to be turned into a lame Saturday Night Live skit this weekend. I think it's a fair prediction, though it might not be lame. The conversation was similar on social media, where conservative activist Charlie Kirk received a lot of replies to his post asking his followers if they liked Britt's speech. Alan Sanders compared it to a B-grade Hallmark movie moment with an unknown actress playing the lead. Stacy in the USA wrote, very babysitter reading a bedtime story like. Xeon, 45, said, reminded me when a person spoke on Sesame Street. And on Real America's Voice, the right-wing hosts were stunned into silence.
May God bless you, and may God continue to bless these United States of America.
I'm sure she's
I'm a fan of her.
I'm sure she's very nice. And I don't want to get like over the top here, but that is everything about that on a night like tonight is wrong.
A reaction that may best represent the Republican Party came from the senior senator from Alabama, former football coach Tommy Tuberville.
Well, considering the circumstances, I thought she did very well. And you know, she's a mom. She's a housewife. She's around people at a young age.
That housewife is his colleague, the first female senator from the state of Alabama. And remember, the clear intention of choosing Katie Britt to deliver the response was to counter the deficit Republicans are facing among women voters and anger about their abortion policy. I don't think they quite accomplished that last night.
I mean, look, I love the fact, and this is just me, I love the fact that conservative people literally watched that and had nothing. I mean, I was going to go to Fox News and see their response, but let's be honest, it's Fox News. It's not a real news station. They're going to do their best to spin it and say, oh, she was so passionate. Oh, she's America's mom. Because, you know, when you label things like patriotically America, America's mom, and all that shit, it labels it. It gets them to the point of, well, she did look America's mom. Here's my thing. I keep on saying image is perception, perception is everything. Okay. First off, the Republicans will never get a person of color. Because I always thought to myself, okay, maybe they'll go different. Maybe they will put someone who's intelligent. Maybe they'll put someone who actually makes some interesting points. But I'm like, let's be honest, it's the Republican Party. The Republican Party that's basically been taken over by Trump. And we should not be surprised anymore. But what did I say before I played that clip? They had to find a white woman. They had to make her look like next girl Dorlish. They couldn't make her look Instagram model famous, because then you wouldn't relate to her, but you made her look next doorish. I mean, the hair was laid down, nice colors, just so warm and inviting. They had to do that to get people to relate. And then the overacting, which again, I agree. The one time I actually agree with the Republican talk show host, the overacting of a Hallmark B movie. We stand with you, and we are with you. What the frack? It's not that I won't say what the frack, but overacting to a T. And again, she is basically fear-mongering. She's fear-mongering about the fact that he didn't say her. He finally said her name. He finally said Lincoln Riley, who was murdered by an illegal immigrant. The fear mongering. How do families make ends meet, and yet Biden is supposed to lower prices? It is amazing to me how much bullshit was in that Republican answer. And at the same time, nobody, and I say this all the time, nobody can seem to turn around and sit there and say, we fucked up. I hate to use that language, but that's the only way I can explain it. We fucked up. Our Republican response to the State of the Union was 30 minutes of gibberish by a C-list actress who supposedly is the rising star in the Republican Party. All I can say from that is, if that's your rising star in the Republican Party, you should be very concerned for your future. Outside of the fact that Trump has all but gotten the Republican nomination to be president again, even though he's under multiple indictments, even though he's still facing court cases, even though he's already been ruled against him in 2 court cases. And yet he has managed to outdo 8 other people and become the Republican nominee all over again. And if you thought that was the end of it, it's not, because the RNC, as we know it, right? Trump's team has taken over, and within days, they have laid off dozens of staffers from the Republican National Committee. Here's the part that should concern you, because again, as soon as Trump's team got in there, folks got axed. At the same time, here's the thing that should bother you. Michael Whatley is the new Republican Party chairman. However, Laura Trump was elected co-chair. Laura Trump, the former President Failure's daughter-in-law, is now the co-chair of the Republican National Committee and is going to focus on fundraising and public appearances. All I can sit there and say is, let me understand this. The Republican National Convention, the Republican National Committee, has been paying Trump's legal bills. We said it 2 weeks ago. No, actually, scratch that. About 3 weeks ago. We sat there and said 3 weeks ago that Laura Trump is his daughter-in-law is trying to run for the head of this committee, the same committee that is over payments to Trump's legal defense funds. She is now the co-chair next to Michael Wheatley. And again, Trump, his team has taken over the Republican National Committee. And yet you see Republicans by the day are resigning or saying that at the end of this term, they're done. GOP people, I think it's time you guys need to admit something. You guys have embraced the cult. The cult is now running the asylum. The GOP, the Republican Party, at this point is a nationalist party. You guys do not stand for anything except taking power and imposing your will on people and calling it the upper hand of morality, when really it is bullshit. And if you don't believe me, you have a current president, you have a former president right now that is trying to stay out of jail using funds from his own party because he cannot pay the judgments that are already leveled against him. So again, all I can sit there and say is it's going to be an interesting election because it's not a slam dunk for Biden. It's not. But when you look at Trump and you look at the other side, they might have a point. But again, it depends if Biden can get everybody to vote. But needless to say, the State of the Union was okay. I would probably give it a C-. At the same time, the Republican response to the State of the Union, cringeworthy at best. But like I said, guys, Biden's going to have a hard time trying to basically get the American people to understand this because his administration just announced a new weapons package for Ukraine. Keep in mind, we have already sent billions with a B to Ukraine to help them in their war against Russia. At the same time, he is announcing a military aid package up to $300 million yesterday, after warning that there would be no money left. Let me get this straight, because again, I have an issue with this. Because whenever we have been supplying funds to Ukraine for a while now, I mean, it was already $1 billion package. Again, this was coupled with the last Republican shutdown that we almost had. We're about to enter a new phase where there could possibly another Republican, where there could be another government shutdown. And now we're establishing a new military package to Ukraine that's $300 million on top of the $1 billion that's already been given out. Make it make sense, because it's going to be a little difficult to explain to the American people who already have a problem making ends meet with higher prices across the board. Income has not increased, and now you're trying to give more money overseas. Now, if I'm conservatives, which I'm not, but if I ever had to give conservatives an alley-oop, here it is. But again, conservatives are chicken hawks. They love war. War is profit. That thing about war. War has always been profit. And you can tell war has been profit because nobody in Congress at this point is complaining about the package that's being prepared for Israel or for the Ukraine. Nobody's complaining. Well, maybe a few, but not everybody. Everybody's either we support Israel or we support Ukraine, and it's fine to support them. But at some point, when does America stop being the world police? When do we stop paying billions of dollars to countries like Israel and complain about the welfare queens of minorities when the true welfare queen has been a country that's been getting billions of dollars every year and nobody complains? Netanyahu is the truest welfare queen of them all. And yet he gets billions and assistance and military assistance from the US. And at the same time, that's the very same man that can call for a ceasefire in Gaza, but refuses not to. At the same time, Biden, you're going to have a hard time convincing voters who are going to wonder, why are you so keen on helping Ukraine and Israel, and yet we're struggling? Again, it's going to be a hard sell for the American president. But switching gears for a second, guys, I wanted to cover this story from Uvalde, because when I tell you one of two things that don't make no sense, that one, the report that came out about an investigator looking into Uvalde school shooting to see if the officers were negligent in their actions. Well, that report came out, and I'm shocked about that, but also shocked that the police chief was able to resign.
Late tonight, the Uvalde, Texas police chief announced he is stepping down after a report came out last week clearing officers of wrongdoing in that horrific shooting, the worst school shooting in American history. Police Chief Daniel Rodriguez saying in a statement, It's been an honor to lead the dedicated men and women of our police department. He did not mention the shooting. He did not mention the report. His resignation is effective April 7th. The assistant chief of police will be named interim chief for the time being. You'll remember an analysis found that police officers on scene knew for something like 77 minutes that more than a dozen students were alive, locked in a classroom while the shooter was in the building. Officers stood by, that analysis said, waiting for tactical gear to arrive. The chief was on vacation, not in Uvalde at the time of the shooting. A total of 19 students were killed and 2 teachers.
So let me get this straight. The police chief who was not there, because keep in mind, the person that was there actually assumed it and was actually making the call to turn around and say, you know what, we are not going in without tactical. 77 minutes they waited. Problem with this, because the shooter was a lone shooter with an assault style rifle, and was in a location to where it could harm more kids. The report that came out sat there and said that, well, the officers did exactly what they were supposed to do. Excuse me? For 77 minutes, they said they did what they were supposed to do. What they were supposed to do was go in at the same time, go ahead and, again, do what they would have done with a minority. Shoot first and ask questions later. But at the same time, not only was the police chief who came back and wanted transparency, was able to resign without issue. I'm like, these were people under your command. You have to assume responsibility, and yet you're able to resign with no issue, and the officers are getting off scot-free. Explain to me, where is the justice in that? Because again, if you watch this podcast or you listen to my podcast, I have always said my position on law enforcement, and I still say it. It is easier to become a law enforcement officer than it is to become a hairstylist, an anesthesiologist, a plumber, a contractor, any of the above. Because in my home state of Nashville, Tennessee, which I have no problem saying because nobody's corrected me, so I know I'm right. In my home state, you only got to be in the police academy for 6 months. 6 months, and then you're out there to protect and serve. 6 months with no educational criminal background is not enough time for an officer to be trained enough to protect and serve the city and state that they live in. If anything, that police training has taught them to shoot first and ask questions later. And you'll be very hard pressed to find officers with additional training that are actually trying to use de-escalation tactics and less lethal. But it always never ceases to amaze me how much protection law enforcement has whenever they get into a jam. That they have quantified immunity, that they don't have to get their statement immediately, that they can mull it over and talk with other officers before giving their statement, that they can really survey the evidence before actually providing testimony. Where else does the protection from those that we ask to protect and serve us really protect and serve themselves? But you're going to sit there and tell me that a group of men sitting outside a door for 77 minutes was a better idea than them going in and trying to take down a lone gunman. Right. Kind of bullshit. But going along, guys, again with another quick news shot at this. The Georgia judge who is over the DA Fannis Willis case will be ruling sometime this week on whether or not the DA should be removed from the case. Keep in mind, this is the same DA that was told that the prosecutor that she brought on, that her and the prosecutor had a special relationship. At the same time, they're trying to see if that relationship was influenced by her paying this man using funds that were initially used for the prosecution of Donald Trump, basically in Georgia. So, long story short, if you've been following this, Fannie Willis got on the witness stand and eviscerated the prosecution. That's the only reason why the prosecution never called her back up to the witness stand since then. She pretty much eviscerated them. The prosecution has tried every other which way to make her look guilty, faulty, or anything of that nature. Why? Because again, it is another black woman that is going to be successful in nailing Trump. We've already seen one black woman get Trump. And again, the clock is ticking because Miss Letitia is waiting to see if Trump's going to cough up $450 million. If not, Trump Towers may be getting repoed. And I hope to God it's on national television. At the same time, again, in Georgia, the election fraud case, the one where Georgia called the Secretary of State looking for 11,000 plus votes. because he had to win the election. Well, is there any way we can find 11,000 more votes? And yet somehow we still have to question whether or not he tried to throw an election. But they can't find anything on Fannie Willis. So what do? They go after her character. Oh, well, this man that she was with, who she hired as a prosecutor, she had relations with him. Okay. Well, he's getting a divorce. Okay. Does that taint the evidence that's against Trump? Was the evidence collected in a manner that was unbecoming? Was it legally searched? Did they make love on all these documents while sitting there going after Trump? I think not. So again, this is a smear campaign dressed up as character assassination. Because if the judge, and also, let's look at worst case scenario. If the judge does remove DA Willis from this case, does the evidence that was collected, does that not mean that Trump will still be convicted? Of course he will. It just depends on whoever the DA is next. However, my money is on it, which again, we will follow until we get a ruling on that. I don't think Willis will be removed because again, you have to prove in court that the prosecutor was basically negligent in their duties. And I'm going to be honest with you, the prosecution that's trying to go after her has been getting their ass kicked. So we'll see what happens from there. But another story, guys, that should be concerning, especially if you're in Colorado, and I talk about these cases where not only does the prosecution mess up, law enforcement mess up, and the judge mess up, what if those on the science side, I'm talking the CSI side, love the show, love the NCIS, CSI, and all those other spinoffs. But those people that handle the data, that handle the tests and whatnot, that is used in these cases, let's just say, what if they fuck up? And again, I apologize for my language. What if they mess up? What happens? Well, that would happen with this lady. This lady you see there, who with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, says that Miss Woods right there may have messed or compromised several hundred different cases. If we're being honest, 652 cases between 2008 and 2023. Now, here's the crazy part. They're saying that she may have compromised those cases, right? All 652. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation is currently looking into it. Here's the crazy part. Now, they said that she mishandled. Let's just be honest, she screwed up. No. Or as they said, she may have deviated from standard operating procedures. That's just spin story for when she fucked up. Now, even though she retired on November 6th, which I'm assuming last year, that it becomes an issue because they're also saying, well, she didn't do anything that was deliberate or manipulating. Wait, time out. Because let me get this straight. She handled DNA evidence for 652 cases. They've deviated from standard operating procedure. But you're going to stand and tell me that she did nothing wrong? I have said this once, and I'll say this again, because usually we find ourselves covering stories of men who were locked away for DNA evidence 20 or 40 or even 40 or even more years down the road, come to find out that the DNA test was handled incorrectly and that they were innocent, only to be released with time they can't get back. Now, think about that. For 652 cases that this woman was over, who's not to say that there's some of those cases, or not a majority of those cases, are innocent individuals that may or may not be sitting in jail or sitting in maximum prison somewhere. And I'm sorry. I have said this once and I'll say it again. If you have a person that mishandles evidence, you have a person that mishandles a case, a person that's residing over a case that rules incorrectly, everything they've done should be immediately scrutinized. It should. And in her case, 652 cases that she may have muffed the ball on, I'm sorry, that's just something you cannot overlook. You can't. Because again, one of those cases may be a person that either got life in prison or 40 years or more. But imagine, if you will, being convicted of something you didn't do because someone decided to skip steps because they want to get something done. And at the same time, you may not get those years back. Crazy, I know. But The last story I got, guys, we can do our feel good segment. Because again, guys, imagine, if you will, with law enforcement that, say, for instance, just to paint a picture, you call a noise complaint on your neighbors, the officer comes to you, you sit there and explain the situation, the officer asks for your ID for no reason. You say you do not need to provide an ID. The officer decides to be pushy. I mean, so pushy to the fact that your son had to record the cell phone data because this officer wanted to impose his will. Unfortunately, it's not a made-up story. This actually happened in Alabama.
So when y'all go over there and talk to him about his music, do y'all ask him for his ID?
Yeah, and he provides it.
No, y'all do not. I be sitting right here watching. Nobody asking for his ID.
I'm not arguing with you.
I'm not arguing with you either. I'm not giving you no. I'm going to jail.
Yes.
If I don't provide my ID,
yes, ma'am.
let's do it. I'm not giving you my ID.
Turn up, put your hands behind your back.
This is ridiculous.
Hey, turn up, put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest.
I need to put my shoes on.
I didn't ask for
Wait a minute, don't you put your hands on me like that.
Hold on. Whoa, hold on, wait. Hold on.
Ma, calm down, please. Everybody, please calm down, please. Ma, everybody, calm down.
I'm gonna give you
please.
one more chance.
Somebody just call the phone and call your daddy.
Ma, please.
Why do you need my ID?
I've already explained to you.
Ma, just
Why
give
do you need my ID?
Ma, just give him your ID, Ma, please.
Why do you need my ID?
Ma, please call. Ma,
Put your hands off me.
no, it's okay. Ma, it's okay. It's okay. Ma, it's okay. Ma, it's okay. It's okay, Ma, it's okay. It's okay, Ma, it's okay. It's okay, Ma, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Yes, I'm recording. I'm recording. I'm recording. I'm recording. I'm recording. I'm recording. I'm recording.
Why you want to rough up a female, dude?
Because you're not complying.
You need Jesus.
Ma, it's okay, Ma. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
This ain't nothing but the devil.
It's okay.
It's okay.
This ain't nothing but the devil. Can I put my shoes on, please? Right here.
Yeah.
This ain't nothing
Hey,
but the
dude, I
devil.
wasn't attacking you, by the way. You know that, right?
You put your hands on my son. You put your hands on my son.
Ma, it's okay, Ma. I understand. I
You put
understand
your
that.
hands
Listen, I
on my
wasn't attacking.
son.
You good, bud?
My son ain't do nothing.
I mean, that's a natural reaction. You know what I mean?
Hey,
Hey, dude, before you take her away, why are you taking her away?
She's right now. She's under arrest for failure to identify.
So is this actually in Alabama? Is this actually in Alabama state law?
That is not the law. That's against the law.
Is this actually in Alabama state law?
No, it's not.
When I'm out with you, as long as I have a legal reason to be out with you, if I ask you to identify yourself, you are then.
So can you inform me? Can you inform me how this process goes? Because if you're arresting her right now over failure
That music loud all day long.
a failure of ID, then
I got y'all. Got you.
We're gonna go to this.
Got you. Got you.
so I'm genuinely curious. I'm genuinely curious about how this
Everybody else
is going right now.
loud, and then when I start causing a bunch of noise,
Fix these for you, okay?
please, it hurts.
Is there one in particular? So look, I'm gonna have to take one off to get to the other, okay?
So how is this process going to go? Because you guys just can't keep her in there cooped up for failure of ID. that makes zero sense. Like logically, that makes no sense.
Not no law. I'm at home.
Hey, Dad, they're arresting my mom because of lack of ID, failure of ID. They're arresting her, and he's arresting her. He ruffled her up and whatnot. You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm about to put my hands
So
on
like they're literally cuffing her and putting her in the back of the car right now. Yeah, Dad. Hey, I have another question. When do you guys bring her back? Because
I'm not bringing her back, but she's going to jail.
For how long?
You'll see a judge, and judge will determine that.
Over an ID?
Yeah.
So like, where can I visibly read this where they say that for like? Because I wanna actually see this law in play in action.
Statute?
Yeah. Pull it up. I want to screenshot this and well, actually I have it recorded, so it doesn't matter. Even though I think it's wrong either way, because there's an old lady that lives right next to him and he's blasting his music as loud as possible. It's not.
So 15-530.
15-530.
Yes, sir.
Law enforcement official can request your name, explanation of his actions. I don't see where it says anything about an ID. It says your name, address, and explanation of address.
She failed to identify, but ID.
I mean, it doesn't specifically, say an ID.
I know, but I'm not going to argue with you either. All right.
That makes zero sense, dude. Dad, they're literally taking her away. But he said he asked for ID. In the law, it does not state you have to provide an ID. They're going away with my mama right now.
Crazy, isn't it? That out of all of that a police officer, right? Again, it's crazy that the son was asking the officer, okay, well, if you're arresting my mom for failure to identify, show me the statute. Now, I have said this multiple times on the show. Know the laws better, know the laws in your city and state. Why? Because law enforcement expects you to be ignorant. They expect to be forceful, they expect to be intimidating to get you to comply. When as long as you keep a cool head, as long as you ask for it, as long as you know the law, they hate that because that means that the stuff they're used to doing, they cannot do. Even though the young man surprised me, I'm like, it's like he asked the officer after he arrested his mom, which by the way, you're under arrest and you did not read her Miranda rights, which again, that's issue number one. Number two, he sat there and said, so you can arrest somebody because they didn't want to show you identification? And he sat there and said, well, show me the statute on it. And he tried. And as you heard him read it, this is the part that's crazy. You heard him read that under Alabama law, right, that you can ask for name, address. And he goes, but that doesn't sound like there's no ID. And he goes, basically, she refused. She refused to give me that, so that's ID. No. And even though, what's it so crazy about this? That in the story itself, because keep in mind, under Alabama state law, which is the same as Tennessee's, you cannot be arrested for refusing to show ID unless you are a person of interest in an ongoing investigation that they have to inform you about. If you are just out of the blue, out of nowhere, and they walk up to you, you don't gotta show ID. Because again, you have to ask, am I under investigation? Am I being detained? Am I doing, if you're not being detained, you can walk off. Am I being detained? Because if you are being detained, then you have to provide ID. Then you get to prove who you are. But if an officer walks up to you like he did with that woman in that case, because again, it's the same woman that called the police for a noise complaint, the officer immediately goes to, what's your ID? Which she does not have to provide. So again, this is why I talk about when it comes to law enforcement. Now, eventually, the case against her was thrown out. Unfortunately, she did go to jail. They did try to charge her with resisting arrest, obstruction of government operations, and attempting to elude police, which again, I don't know how you could elude the police in your own house. But all the charges are being dropped against her because Mayor Earl Johnson has come out and said that the police department would undergo additional training, which again, I have sat there and said this, and I will not stop saying this. It is amazing to me that every time you see law enforcement, what's the first thing they do? They try to intimidate. They try to intimidate. If you don't fall for that, they go for the arrest. When you don't go for that, then they want to get forceful. But unless you're a shooter in body armor, and then all of a sudden, well, we might want to hold back a little bit. Again, I have said this, minorities in law enforcement. I always say F the police because the police do not care. I always say F the police because when we ask for accountability, we get complaints. When we ask for a restructuring of how police reform is done, they complain that the job is too hard. We don't get paid enough. And at the same time, they have better protection than. Actually, you know what? If you're really thinking about it in America, the greatest things that have protections are guns, followed by law enforcement. and yet they complain. And I've sat there and said it before. If we look at the law enforcement that's done in other countries, and yet look at the requirements that they require college degrees. They require at least 2 to 4 years of training before they're allowed to actually be on the street. Whereas in America, as I said before, half a year and they're out. And yet that officer, instead of being reprimanded, will undergo additional training, and the cycle of what happens to Black people along with officers continues. But yet me saying F the police is wrong. Right. So we're going to go move on to our feel good segment, because usually how the Frack We Got Here, we usually talk about a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes they can use your faith in humanity, but hey, it's Wednesday, hump day, and we will leave you guys out with some good vibrations going into Thursday. And the queen bee herself, Beyonce, outside of breaking into country music and hopefully uplifting other country music artists, has decided to help out those that are simply wanting to better themselves in the finer forms of cosmetology.
Beyonce surprising a school with one of a handful of grants from her charity foundation. ABC's Jacqueline Lee has the details. Jacqueline, good morning. Lucky them.
Yes, hey, Janae, good morning. And this is a fun one. Cosmetology school is pricey. We're talking at least $15,000. And for some, the cost is too expensive to achieve their dreams until now.
When Beyonce calls, you answer.
Oh my God, I am super excited.
For Atia Johnson, she found out her cosmetology academy was hand-selected by Queen Bee herself to receive $50,000 for student scholarships.
Are you ready to be cosmetology's new elite?
Johnson owns Jana's Cosmetology Academy in Gloucester Township, which, by the way, is the first Black-owned cosmetology school in New Jersey.
The team thought it was a big old scam. I'm not going to lie.
The Sacred By Be Good Fund awarding $500,000 annually to inclusive cosmetology schools and salons in New Jersey and 4 cities, including Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, and Los Angeles.
One of the reasons they picked you is because you're one of the only schools on the East Coast to offer a course for textured hair. Why is that so important?
When I went to cosmetology school in a 9-month program, there was only about 2 weeks of information on textured hair. I was able to learn what I needed to learn as far as the industry was concerned, thanks to my mom. But for many others, they don't have that opportunity.
5 of Johnson's students will receive $10,000 scholarships. Alumna Quashir Page says she's excited for future students. She was forced to drop out of cosmetology school due to financial difficulties, graduating years later after receiving an outside scholarship.
The struggle from before, it was a lot. Like she was saying, growing in the industry in the beginning, you're still in your building phase. It's not a lot of money that you're making when you're just starting.
Current student Zanasia Jackson can't wait to follow her dreams.
I love when my clients get out of my chair and they feel like just better about themselves. It makes me feel good making other people feel good.
And we love that. So as for Jana's Cosmetology Academy, get this, they did not even apply for the grant. Beyonce's team found them and reached out, calling them a diamond in the rough, guys.
Wow. And honestly, like I said before, say what you want about Beyonce. She out there doing the Lord's work. But definitely it's nice to see people actually get rewarded. And so far, a rewarding grant to where where students can, extend or get certified in cosmetology and not do it with a heavy debt. Again, it's a beautiful thing. So that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. And thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. That being said, guys, I do want to do some shameless plugging on my way out, as I usually do. Shout out to Vaughn at BigBZA.net on social media. Definitely check him out on his music page, as his music can be used for songs, podcasts, theme songs, things of that nature. Definitely check him out at BigBZA. Everywhere. Also, check out blurredstation.com. That was a terrible segue. Guys, I cannot stress this enough that, we needed something that was similar to Netflix, but it was for us, developed by us, for us to enjoy. We have built up multimedia networks. We took Tubi, because Tubi is owned by the same guy that does Fox. And at the same time, we have built these networks up to be giants, and yet we have nothing of our own. Blurred Station can do exactly that. If you don't know about Blurred Station, simply go to blurredstation.com, see what's actually out there, guys. They have anime, they have television shows, they have cartoons, they have so many things on the horizon and more things to come. And if you want to see what it's about or you want to join it, definitely go to the Join Now button. And when you do the Join Now button, please select the Blurred's iView Affinity membership, guys. Again, as you see, it's $10.99. You can select anybody there. We would all appreciate it. And then select the Affinity membership and subscribe now. It is $10.99 a month. I'm sorry, $10.99 a month is a great deal because you can still be able to get your stream on and be able to get food. To me, that's a big bonus. At the same time, guys, after 36 months of paying $10.99, you have the ability to own a piece of Blurred Station. Have you ever wanted to own a piece of a network conglomerate like Apple TV, Amazon, Hulu, or things of that nature, but without not paying an assload amount of money just to own it? You can do so here at Blurred Station for $10.99. And if you are a content creator and you want to be able to see about getting your stuff added to Blurred Station, simply become a member first, and then you can actually be able to reach in contact with the owners of Blurred Station. And again, the beauty about this is you will keep your own content. They just want a piece of the distribution, and which is, again, in the world of content creators, content is basically your currency. It is your baby. You want to keep as much of it as you can. Otherwise, going to Tubi or other place like that, they will definitely take it away from you. But definitely check out blurredstation.com. If you want to join, guys, please select the Blurred's iView Affinity membership. Select any of us there, and we will certainly appreciate it. The last thing I'll say before I get out of here, guys, again, we already know it's going to be a Biden-Trump rematch. Not the only election that's going down. I cannot stress this enough. Get to know the candidates in your local area and your state. We're not just talking about the federal level here. Yes, 2024 will determine who will be America's next president. This is true. At the same time, it won't be too long before the midterms come up and we have to reshuffle the Senate and Republican. In other words, we have to reshuffle the Senate and the House of Representatives again. We also have to elect different politicians in each city and state. For the city and state that you're in, get to know the candidates, press them about the issues. Get answers. Just don't accept the usual tongue-in-cheek speech, because the only way we're going to change things around here, guys, is to be informed and act. And if you don't like the choices that are out there and you think you can do a better job, there are plenty of sites out there that can show you how to run for office in your local area. Again, we have seen Trump cultists. We have seen Tea Party people do it. If those idiots can run for office and win, and I'm not calling you guys who are not these people idiots, I'm just using it as a bar. If those idiots can get in, then someone who can think miles ahead of them and be better, such as yourselves, can do it as well. Either way, act, engage, and be a part of it. We can no longer sit and complain about the choices being handed to us if we're not willing to do the work. That's all I'm saying. But the last thing about the Frack We Got Here, guys, is all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information and allow you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a lot of perspective that goes along with it. We try to right the wrongs of our society by being progressive, like electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black woman to the U.S. Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to be a national cybersecurity advisor. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat them. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go about our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Again, like, share, hit the notification buttons when they come on, guys. We simply cannot do this without you, and I certainly mean that. Take care of yourselves and each other, guys, and we'll all get through this. Peace.